Dan Schneider is not happy with the Quiet on Set docuseries. Despite his initial response to the release of it, he's since decided to take legal action against the producers, and it's not looking good. Back in March, Investigation Discovery released their Quiet on Set docuseries, where former child stars and ex-Nickelodeon employees sat down to expose the network. They detailed shocking events that happened behind the scenes, making you rethink some of the content that was put out there for children to view in the early 2000s. The docuseries included parts that focused on Dan Schneider and his career and what he was bringing to set. And now he's decided to sue over the series. It's reported that in a statement shared with USA Today Wednesday, Schneider said, "After seeing Quiet on Set and its trailer and their reactions to them, I sadly have no choice but to take legal action against the people behind it." According to reports, Dan believes that the docuseries misled viewers in order to increase their ratings, and he feels as though they implied that he was involved in or facilitated horrific crimes. He said in a statement, "I have no objection to anyone highlighting my failures as a boss." But he said it's wrong to mislead millions of people to false conclusions about him having been involved in criminal acts, claiming by suing he is setting the record straight. He's referred to the series as a hit job, and it's been reported that Schneider seeks unspecified damages and a court order forcing producers to remove allegedly defamatory portions of the docuseries or have it completely taken down. In Quiet on Set, they dove into the history of Dan's career, and 2 female writers for The Amanda Show were featured in the documentary, having revealed their horrible experiences working with Dan. They claimed that he didn't think women were funny. They also claimed that he would play adult content on his computer and make people do uncomfortable things like giving massages. Speaking of The Amanda Show, several pointed out things about the show. People found so many moments uncomfortable, and not just from this one, but from several shows that Dan was behind, which this wasn't the first time that Dan had been a big topic over the years. People in the past have also come out with their stories about Dan or talked about how things seemed a little off. When Jennette McCurdy's book was released in 2022, she had detailed the exploitation she faced at the hands of someone referred to as the creator. Dan Schneider was alleged to be this creator that she was talking about, and for anyone who does not know Dan's history, he is a former Nickelodeon executive, one responsible for shows such as iCarly, Sam and Cat, Zoe 101, Victorious, The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Kenan and Kel, and several others. He was the network's golden boy and responsible for so many careers. In 2018, though, Nickelodeon announced that they would no longer be working with Dan, and there were several publications that had reported on complaints about his alleged behavior, including his alleged well-documented temper issues. An internal investigation had been done within the company, and they claimed to have found that he was difficult to work with and prone to tantrums and angry emails, but said that any other misconduct was not found during the investigation. In Quiet on Set, and also in Jennette McCurdy's book, when we're talking about the creator, it did sound like there were a lot of other things that were not found in the investigation done by Nickelodeon that he had done or been a part of. And especially in Quiet on Set, they were diving into the things that people had alleged about Dan, or things that just felt weird about him, despite what the network claimed. Dan never addressed any alleged claims against him as the creator featured in Jennette's book, but when it came to Quiet on Set, prior to taking legal action, he spoke out. I talked about this right when it happened, but on March 19th, Dan posted a video response to the series onto his YouTube channel, and people felt like the whole interview seemed to be very calculated. The interview was done by Bobby Bowman, who is also known as Boogie, who played Tebow on iCarly. The video seemed to be produced by Dan and his team and then sent around to news outlets to release. In it, Dan admitted to watching the recent Investigation Discovery Quiet on Set series, saying that it was hard for him to get through what was being said about him, claiming that a lot of this was all in his past. He seemed to admit to some wrongdoings, but he certainly was making excuses for himself of not knowing any better at the time because he was young and inexperienced, and that seems to be his reasonings to why he made inappropriate jokes in the writer's room and asked for massages, and he alleged that it wouldn't be how things would be with him today.
Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult, me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret, and I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
Let's talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation. Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms, and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up. But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it. I said things that went too far or made practical jokes that went too far, and that was wrong. And that was because, you know, I was an inexperienced producer. I was immature. Wouldn't happen today, but I'm just really sorry it happened.
Everything seemed very downplayed in this video. I mean, he was conducting this interview himself, basically. Like, I'm sure he wrote his own questions. I'm sure he knew exactly what to say. He was very well prepared for what this whole video was going to look like. So obviously he wasn't going to be interrogated with some seriously hard questions and then throw it on his own YouTube channel. But people were seeing right through it. And it just felt like he was saying, I'm sorry I messed up, whoops. In the video, they did talk about the concerns that people have brought up after watching Quiet on Set, as they've seen clips from these Nickelodeon shows Dan worked on and felt that there was a lot of adult innuendos in these shows. And Dan tried to say that his only intention was to write jokes for kids, despite what the public thinks.
Every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny, okay? Now we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, oh, you know, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid show. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show. Just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I want my shows to be popular. I want everyone to like it. The more people who like the shows, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in a show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
So I think it's big for you to say with your work, if it's viewed as that today, you don't have a problem.
Cut it. Cut it.
I mean, that's a solution.
The last thing I want to ever do
Yeah.
is put any content in a show that's going to upset my audience and make them want to turn off the TV.
Now, this was hard for people to believe from him when his reputation was this mean, angry, hard to work with boss who was impossible to stand up to, but it later also seemed like he was trying to push the blame off of him in a way, to try and say that he couldn't just write a joke and then put it on a show, like it had to go through approval from multiple different parties, and if someone had said anything about it being inappropriate, they would have taken it out. And Boogie also in this conversation expressed things he didn't like about the series, talking about how he didn't like the way that they painted Dan's relationships, which is interesting. I don't think that that is a real thought that Boogie had, but I do think that this is something that Dan wanted him to say or scripted him to say in this YouTube video that they were making together, because this is exactly what Dan is suing the producers of Quiet on Set over, because he did not like the way that he was painted in the series. But when this was brought up in his YouTube video, they talked about Amanda Bynes and how the series said that he was so close with her, and Boogie just simply praised the fact that kids were so close with Dan to the point that they could call him if they had troubles with their parents, and the two of them only made it seem like a whole positive thing that he was so close with some kids.
What kind of bothered me was how they depicted your relationship with the cast.
Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah, just me being there, I knew the dynamic was trust. I understood that in situations where they may have had turmoil, whether it be with their families, whether it be other castmates, they came to you. Versus how they made you look. With that said, Amanda Bynes was brought up in the series and her emancipation and how you were involved in that. Can you talk to us about it?
She tried to get emancipated and ended up not working out. She didn't. One night, it was very late, well after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning, phone rang, I answered, it was Amanda. She was upset, she was in distress, she had had some conflict with her parents, I think her father, and she called me. I was immediately concerned about her safety. I called someone who I knew was fairly nearby. That person was able to go and pick her up. Then I knew she was safe. I felt better. She ended up being taken to the police.
It's just so crazy to hear Dan defend himself in this YouTube video, and now he's suing. Like, he was clearly much angrier about the series than he led on to believe in this video, and maybe this video he thought was going to help his image, and when it only made things worse by how calculated and scripted it felt, he decided to sue. I mean, I do feel as though his image was damaged a long time ago prior to the series coming out, as people have talked about him for years now, alleging things and finding weird plot lines in Nickelodeon shows or behind the scenes moments that didn't look right, but clearly this was the thing that Dan felt really did it for him. Now, I'm not sure what will happen from here, if this lawsuit will go anywhere, but that is what Dan has come out to say in his filings and what has been reported as of right now. I want to know what you guys think about all of this in the comments. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye, guys.